of course, live now. Thank you very much, Beverly, for being part of the symposium. Actually, I wanted you to be part of that other one also, Indigenous Peoples and Mediation. I wanted you to be part of that, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. But I'm sure you're going to touch the same thing somewhere.
Yes, I think I overlooked it. I thought I responded to you. So when the second invitation came in, said, "Oh, my my what you call this confirmation did not push through." So I just sent the same email to you, and I'm glad that you persisted in inviting me, at least so that I can bring in some of my thoughts on the theme of the symposium.
Yeah. So think that you are actually talking about two. You're talking about that symposium and this one, and you are bringing them two together, both of them together.
Yes.
But Beverly, what you need to do is you need to tell us about the symposium first and then about yourself, because both those things are important. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, when I was looking into your invitation, I had some thoughts like, what does Vikram want to do with this symposium? Because the theme was just simply like colonization, decolonization, and mediation. What are these three topics, and what brings them together? So my thinking was this would be an opportunity for indigenous peoples to further expound on the current issues that we are facing today, and look back and what brings in what was the cause, what brought all of these issues that we were looking into. So if there's one thing in history that would mark a milestone for indigenous peoples, would be colonization, because that would be the start of our minoritization. That would be the start of a formal or a more institutionalized discrimination against indigenous peoples. Now, when we speak probably of decolonization, my understanding would be what are the initiatives, what are the efforts, or how do indigenous peoples or any of those who are marginalized or vulnerable peoples address their situation? How do they address the issues that they are confronting now? Like, what are the forms? What are the possible costs of actions that they could do? Mediation, I would look at it as a form or another way of addressing the issues, but not necessarily limiting efforts within what is defined by mediation. So that's the way I look at it, the symposium. And it would cut across different peoples. It would cast across different, gender, sexuality, and even cuts across classes. So probably in all of these conversations that we've been having since last month and continuing to this month, maybe we can find some commonalities, and maybe that's where we could also try to see if we can collaborate or work together, or in our or how can we work in solidarity with each other to address these issues. So that's the way I look at the topic.
No, absolutely. That's why I asked you, because you actually put it out really nicely. So definitely, I think. But before you tell us about yourself, give me just half a minute. Let me just put up the where people can find information. So mediatorvikram.com. Just go there. You'll find the details of various event shows. You'll find all the links to the schedule and everything there. I won't take Beverly's time to get into that. So all the links and all are here. So please have a look. And I'm not going to take your time, because I want because in a way I'm putting in two symposia into one session. So please, Beverly, all about yourself, about the topic. I'm a spectator up till you don't call me.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm from the Philippines. I'm indigenous woman from the Cordillera. We are collectively called as Igorots. It's a word that has been derived from the Spanish word Igorotes, or people from the mountains, because we come from the mountainous region, Cordillera. I'm on Kankanaey and Bontok. That's the specific indigenous peoples group that I belong to. Currently, I coordinate a global platform of Indigenous peoples, communities, and organizations, and some advocate groups. And this is the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. At national level, I'm the international officer, solidarity officer of Katribu, which is a national alliance of Indigenous peoples organizations in the Philippines. So basically, my background is more on human rights and Indigenous peoples' rights, and we give emphasis on campaigns on the ground, and organizing different community organizations so that we will be able to effectively or more collectively address these issues. So that's basically me. So I work at a national organization and at the same time a global organization with the hope that it closes the gap between what's happening at global and what's happening at national, and bringing more attention what's happening in global, national to global. More often than not, uh, we see a difference in what's happening at country and what's happening probably at the UN or any of these intergovernmental mechanisms. So that's basically me.
That's a very short version of you. There's so much that you're doing, and
Yes.
which of course, because if we talk about that, that'll be half the session itself. So
Yes.
yes. So the topic, and you're now on the topic, and like I said, you're talking about indigenous peoples and mediation, and colonization, decolonization, and mediation. You're giving us the entire scenario, please.
Well, maybe we could start with what are the issues that indigenous peoples in the Philippines are confronting right now? And probably the question would be, because we're under a new president. Recently, we had our elections in May. Would the situation be different under the administration of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.? Because he, being the son of the dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr., who declared martial law in the 1970s. Practically, our situation is the same. Nothing much has changed because we don't see a reversal of the policies of past administrations in relation to indigenous people. So, what are these policies, or how does the state, the Philippine state, look at the indigenous peoples? One, if it's in relation to ancestral land, territories, and waters, like any previous administration, even those that the colonial governments at that time has always treated our communities, our lands as resource-based. It has always been an area of extraction of these resources. So this is where you will find commercial mining, destructive mining. Indigenous communities are host to several dams that have been set up earlier, and this continues to present day. So from the time that the Spaniards came in the Philippines and they set up all of these mines are still operating up to now. And from then to present, the dispossession of indigenous peoples of their lands has gotten to be more, more intense and worse. Two will be also, I say it's the policy of discrimination. Because despite today it's supposed to be a modern era, with internet, with cell phones, and all of these things, with Wi-Fi. You would probably have people having a broader understanding of who indigenous peoples are, but unfortunately, society largely still looks at indigenous peoples as savages, uneducated, uncivilized, dirty, or backward. And this discrimination also leads to us being treated as second-class citizens, or probably third-class citizens for many. And such discrimination, such treatment, such status also leads to a denial of indigenous peoples of, let's say, social services like education, health, and you would see this very what calls the access for indigenous peoples is quite low. Discrimination can also be seen on the level of participation of indigenous peoples in governance or in the democratic processes in society or even in the state. I mean, we still have to fight for this, and this we can see because even for projects that are going to be set up or built in our territories, we're not consulted, no. At the most, I mean, the normal, what do you call this? The normal experience would be still a violation of free, prior, informed consent. You know? And the third characterization that I would look in the situation of indigenous peoples will be a situation of intensifying, continued and intensifying repression. And this can come in different forms. This can come in the form of, deploying military in our communities, which we call militarization. And this serves to purpose. It's a counterinsurgency policy, and at the same time, it's also a policy of defending these investments or these projects that we are opposing in indigenous people's territories. And as I've mentioned, this did not happen only at this decade or probably the previous decade, but it is something that has started during the advent of colonization. And as years go by, it has been further institutionalized, not only by colonial governments, but later on further institutionalized because it has been adopted by modern day, what we say, republics that are supposed to be, independent from their colonial masters at the time. But that then, because of the adaptation of these policies, colonization continues to present. The problems have just worsened or probably taken on a different form, but it still continues. So that's the way I look at it. Speaking of indigenous peoples, it will be on land dispossession. In terms of identity and participation, it's still discrimination and exclusion. And in the field of politics, it will be a policy of repression. And this is common, for many indigenous peoples in the world. In fact, now with the, probably since 9/11, we see now a growing, what we call this, growing labeling or vilification of indigenous peoples as terrorists. Not because they are members of so-called revolutionary movements, but also because of their opposition or critique or even dissent of government's policies. And this is very special in the Philippines. And in fact, we have a specific law, anti-terrorism act that can, well, as many lawyers would have say it's quite vague, broad in terms of what it defines as an act of terrorism. So any form of dissent or action can be classified as an act of terrorism. And maybe because of our militancy, because of the kind of actions, also direct actions that we do to how do you say, protect or defend our communities, more often than not, we are classified by government as terrorists, labeled as such, vilified as such.
Yeah. Well, because I think that's a serious thing everywhere, and to be able to, like you said, because the colonizer wanted to extract resources at that time, and obviously for them development and looking at the people was not, and they had to create that kind of a thing, like you said, being, I don't know, I don't like to use, but savage, what you had as savages or whatever, that distinction, or that they wanted to create that. But for me, I think that's where I wanted to bring forward mediation, because if I'm focused on that let us look at how people in the indigenous people, how were they actually resolving disputes, because I think they were far ahead and we have lots to learn. So let's pick that up. other areas, let other people who'll be working on those areas to put that forward. But I just want to show that, yes, that is something that used to happen. That's a more civilized way of resolving disputes. And what the colonizer brought in was something for their benefit. Same thing, extracting resources or dispute resolution, whatever, it was for their benefit. So what you need to take us through is something on the history of dispute resolution, mediation in your region, and then how after decolonization, how things have remained the same or how it has changed.
And I think from the region where I come from, traditionally, communities would settle their conflict through what we call peace negotiations or peace talks, and this results into peace pacts or peace agreements. So these are basically bilateral agreements between two communities or between two tribes. And the issues with revolve along issues of land, in terms of boundary, territories. That was still a problem at the time between two communities. It can be an issue of honor. It can be an issue of life and, if somebody killed somebody from one community, it can also be an issue of property. And these are resolved in such way. But if the peace pact is either violated or they don't reach into an agreement, we have what we call, tribal conflicts can ensue. And the conflicts can be, it can be armed in terms of, it's especially if it's a concept of defense of territory. But as you mentioned, conflicts, I think, between communities, between peoples, between tribes, I would agree, can be best settled peacefully through mediation, through discussion, by threshing out the issues and coming out with an agreement that will settle the conflict, that will benefit both of the parties. However, I think when it comes to conflict against like corporations or conflict of people and the corporations or conflict between the state, that's quite difficult to mediate because the interests might vary. But there are many principles of traditional indigenous peoples dispute settlement or even the justice system that we can learn and apply in modern day society. And I think one thing that I have observed when we speak of judicial system of indigenous peoples is really the involvement of all parties to come out in good faith to the question of trust, the question of bringing out all the necessary information so that, being truthful about the issue. That's one thing that would differentiate such kind of mediation. But I would probably find it more difficult to do mediation when it involves, state institutions or private corporations that are, the interest would be different.
No,
So
I'll tell you,
maybe.
Beverly, I tell you, the thing is that this is the thing about mediation, that people actually feel that this will not be possible in, say, if the people say, oh, complex matters, high value commercial or community being affected by corporations. And that's the whole idea of bringing out all this. So in the last symposium on indigenous peoples and mediation, there was Luis Ore. Luis Ore is in Peru. And he's come on various of my shows and events, and he talks about his experience there. Very successfully, they have worked with companies who have mining projects in Peru, and how they have mediated that, where obviously violence was one of the issues there. So in the last symposium on indigenous peoples and mediation, he's taken us through a case study of his, where he was doing work in Ecuador of, again, mining project being affected by affecting communities. So I think that's where the issue lies, that because I feel that the whole colonization mindset has given you this feeling that someone needs to decide for us, and how will people be able to mediate this? But you'll be surprised that it works. So this is what we have to bring out, that we have to clear that. And that's why I'm going back to dispute resolution in general and mediation within your community, where within communities, how are they looking at it? Because I feel that we have to learn from that and then take it into various things.
I would agree, but then probably it's better handled at a local level where the people and communities have a bigger control of their what do you call this, of their lives, or even of the process. But then not all communities are the same, no. The level of development of communities are also uneven. Probably we have a community that's more assertive and united as far as what they want as a collective. And two, probably we will also take into consideration the nature of conflicts. Some relations are antagonistic, so it's something that we have to work in. But I'm not saying that it would not work. In fact, here in the Philippines, we because of the ongoing civil war between government and the underground revolutionary movement, we have always been supportive of the continuation and resumption of the peace talks between these two parties, because we believe that by being able to continue such peace talks, they are able to come out to address the cause of the conflict in the country, and probably together, not only by them, with the involvement of other stakeholders, civil society, indigenous peoples, etc., we can come out with solutions that will address the conflict. Unfortunately, President Duterte, the former president, stopped the peace negotiations, the peace talks, and it has not resumed under his regime. And I'm not so sure, I'm not so positive that it will continue immediately now, soon, under the new government. But it is something that we are also actively campaigning. It's better to talk peace even at the same while we are also waging war, because it will also bring, not only bring out the issues, but it will also probably come out with certain agreements that will be productive, or protect indigenous peoples, or the Filipino people in general, in this issue of civil war in the country.
Yeah. No, I think that this is something which I mean, blame government sometimes and people otherwise, because I think the whole concept of having those mediators in the community, nationally, everywhere, I think that's gone missing. I think that layer has gone missing. And again, I put a lot to colonization there, because that's what the colonizer wanted. The colonizer did not want you to sit together and settle your issues.
Exactly.
Where
Divide and rule.
exactly.
Yes.
So that kind of an atmosphere that was created, and that's why I am talking about decolonization also, only because that continued, and the governments that came after that it was easy for them to pick up the same structure, because it worked for the colonizer, and if you want to rule, that works for you. So we have to see, of course, we have to look at solutions, because I'm looking at it from the grassroots level to create those, I call them mediation circles. Let's start right at the school level, at a community level. Let's grow from there. But I think those people have to be out there. People have to see those people, people with the mediator mindset, see how they're going about it. And first of all, trust. I think the trust is the most important aspect. And I think that part of it, again, is something that has to be removed if you want to rule. So you have to break society up, the divide and rule that the colonizer brought. So you have to put those things inside, and if you put that in, where is the trust going to be there? So there's a lot of work there. I'm looking at it. I know, but
it cannot be done overnight.
yes, and Beverly, you have to be part of that. We have to find ways to create it. It'll take its time. We'll take our baby steps, but I think we need to now look at it from the grassroots level. On the larger level, things have gone into, look, activism, advocacy, politics is going to be one part, which will happen, will keep happening. But on this side, we have to create it at the grassroots level. And if I keep saying that those people with the mediator mindset, if you identify within your communities and start in schools, they have a larger role to play. And one is mediation, the other is role of mediators. So I think the role of mediators in consensus building or dialogue and all that will become important, because obviously they'll be trusted. And then as we go along, I would think that on a national level, international level, when these people are there, I keep saying mediators as leaders and leaders as mediators, we'll have to reach that level. So that's the larger concept that I I'm looking at,
Well,
but
definitely, definitely. I think I would believe that, for you to become a successful mediator, you will also be a leader. But at the same time, you also have a strong, standpoint that both parties in a conflict respect you for it, and it's not an easy way. Even solving conflicts. Between two friends, it's not it's an
yeah,
issue. So what more for a more complex issue when we speak of a community against a mining giant, or you have a community against government when speaking of militarization. So I would agree, baby steps. And for me, I think I will, at least in the Philippines, the way I look at it, where this can come in would be on the issue of the peace talks, supporting the peace talks, and making the people, involved in the process, bring out their concerns with both parties. I mean, what do they want? How government to how should government address the issue of indigenous peoples? How should the other party, the belligerent force, address the issue of indigenous peoples, rather than without the peace talks, no, without the peace negotiations. So I think at the national level that can be, and we have been doing our part. In fact, when the peace talks started, we have always been doing consultations, no, trying to invite representatives of both parties at community level, so that to have a direct what they call this dialogue, direct conversation with indigenous communities. And we've come up with several recommendations, starting from 2000, if I am not mistaken, no, 1998, I think, or 1999. And then in the prior to the cancellation of the peace talks under President Duterte, we actually came out with a proposed section for the agreement between government and the revolutionary forces on social and economic reforms. And that dealt with indigenous people's rights. And that includes, addressing what do you mean by free, prior, informed consent? What do you mean by recognizing ancestral land rights? And it was fully adopted by the Revolutionary Party. In principle, it was also adopted by government, and they came out with what do you call this, a joint draft. And unfortunately, the discussions on the contents of this agreement on social and economic affairs did not push through, because the peace talks has been canceled. But then, sometimes peace talks are canceled, they're put impasse, but then they resume at a certain point. So it's something that we're still working on. So let's do that. And I would agree on the baby steps. And that would also include, capacitating indigenous peoples on how to do about mediation, taking into consideration their, what do you call this, their tradition of peacekeeping, their tradition of settling disputes with communities. And these are things, no, there are many positive aspects of this traditional practice that we can probably adopt and enhance, that we can apply in today's situation.
yeah, no. But only thing is, in the larger issue, there is actually a small issue. I think your mic is touching you. I think so. It keeps, there's a little sound which keeps coming there at the back. So I think the mic. I think that's what's happening. So maybe. Otherwise, your
Okay.
sound is perfect. Your sound is perfect, but I think
I keep on moving.
yeah, exactly. So it basically hits something. No, I think
Mhm.
for that, Beverly, I think one thing that we need to do is that, of course, pre-colonial dispute resolution in communities, how much do we know about that? Because definitely people who would know that, whether it got passed down, I think something we need to bring that out as to this is what used to happen. This is the way we sat together. So do we have anything on that pre-colonial aspect?
Well, we have done some level of documentation in the Cordillera in relation to tribal conflicts or inter-village conflicts. And there has been, well, at least my local organization has come out with position that this is something that we can adopt. But the concept of tribal wars, no, or in two communities would really fight it out, it's something that we're also mediating to avoid, because at the end of the day, it's the community's resources, especially in a time of economic crisis, would be what they call this, largely decreased, because they will even go to the extent, of selling their heirlooms, their precious cows and carabaos to be able to arm themselves. And then with this, it also results to death. It complicates matters. So it's something that we have. So we have a paper on the practice of tribal war in the Cordillera. There have been some, but these are unpublished researches in Mindanao between all similar. Also, what they call this? They call it pangayaw, but it's also the same concept of tribal war. But what we think, that's why we did also these researches, because there are positive aspects of such practice that we can adopt, and one really will be the defense of territories, and how do you look at land, how do you look at honor. That's it, no? And I think in several occasions, because if I'm not mistaken, the judicial branch of government, the Supreme Court of the Philippines, has also embarked on a project of mediation, training, community leaders to become mediators in their own right, especially in settling disputes at local level, so that it doesn't go to court. Because if we can avoid going to court, which is tedious, which is expensive, and then they clog also the dockets of the court, and if we can probably settle it at community faster, and probably the parties aggrieved will also feel more, they're able to get justice in a short period of time. So that's also something that we have supported in the past, so that even the efforts of our elders to settle conflicts at our communities can also be judicially recognized by the court themselves.
Yeah. I think that's an important part. That's the important part, that if there is some method of dispute resolution within the communities which has been going on, to give recognition to that, I think that's important. And but first, to be able to understand what that method is, because definitely, like I said, is it the purer form which was there, or did colonization change that and people's attitude? How is
but
that
there's
working?
no pure form now.
So you have to get
everything
there.
has changed. Yes.
The idea being that let's just tell people, look, thing is that the word mediation is going around, okay, like you said, through the court system or wherever. But first is, people, are they familiar with that word? Are they be able to understand what that is? Because that education by itself is important. Because ultimately, that what colonization did was that someone will decide for you. That's the kind of mentality that was developed. But here, mediation is something that you have to tell them that, look, this is something that you settle on your terms. No one decides for you. Whether that's been communicated to them or not, one thing we have to see. Because I know here, I do my little test check, and I know people go there, talk about mediation, and they connect it to some method of dispute resolution in that village, which is not mediation, which is that elected body taking a decision for you, and they connect it to that. So now, in the mind of those people, that becomes mediation, that someone is deciding for you. It might not be a court, but now it is your elected body. They're not being able to differentiate the two because look, when you go out and tell people about mediation, how much time do these people have? I don't know how much time they have, how much time they actually spend to tell them that difference. So for me, that's big. That's one part of it, to be able to explain to them what mediation is. And for that, I have found it easy if you can connect it either to a word which is familiar to them. So that's why I'm saying that if there is something which process that is available, we can connect to that word. I would think that'd be easier to start with.
I'm trying to think of the term, no, but it's at the tip of my tongue. We do have a local term for that, because normally traditionally in context of tribal war, it is those who are children of both tribes, descendants of both tribes, who sort of facilitates, brings the two tribes together to settle a conflict. Well, they're mestizos, so that's the closest I can think, that they're probably their mother is from the other tribe and the father is from the other tribe. So in that case, they what do you call this? Their security or their what also their safety is at risk because they belong to both tribes. So in that sense, they are normally assigned the task to be, uh, not messengers, more than messengers, to bring the parties together to be able to discuss, because they cannot say that their interest stands only for one tribe, but their interest goes for the interest of both tribes. So I cannot think, but I'm trying to look. I was also trying to look for the book, so I wanted to show it to you, so that we can look at it. But it's something that I think, as far as the Philippines or probably indigenous peoples in general are concerned, it's something that we need to research on. It's something that we need to popularize, and see how it applies in this situation of conflict that we find ourselves in. Because in more often than not, indigenous communities are really conflict areas, no? Conflict with the state, conflict with state security forces, conflict with private corporations, conflict in the communities. So that's something, that's uh, another form or option that we can employ to address our concerns. And we can probably also complement such efforts with what we are doing on engaging human rights institutions at national, in country, and engaging human rights institutions at global, maybe at the UN and other mechanisms that we can find ourselves, that we can join and engage in. Probably complementing that also will be, how do we, how do you say this? Engage government to look into policies, because if in mediation, it's also a question of trust and what will be the framework that you will apply. And that would also include engaging government, the parliament or legislature to review laws, that would affect, a more free and vibrant participation of people in these processes. So those are things, and maybe also looking into the judicial system that would what do you call this, easily file charges, like in our case as indigenous peoples. Now with the terrorist law, this is something that needs to be reviewed on, because it's so difficult also to be in a mediation process if you are also at the back of your mind, branded or labeled as a criminal or as a terrorist. Where does good faith come in? So I think those are things that we can look into as can be independent process. No, not cannot be independent, but engagements that we can use also to complement mediation.
Because I think from what you said, look, like you said, those people who belong to two tribes and them coming together to bring people together. So what I did was I wanted to actually distinguish between a peacemaker and a mediator, because what is happening is that skill and role of a mediator sometimes gets merged in this whole peace, being a peacemaker kind of thing becomes like, oh, this is the same thing. So first I want people to value the skills of a mediator. So to distinguish, if you read, if you go to that website, my website, you will actually, there's a World Mediation Circle that I put down. So I put this down. So the mediator mindset and a peacemaker, we need both of them. To bring people together is a skill by itself, but then mediation is a skill. So first that distinguishing thing, so people then can actually identify the mediators.
Yeah.
That's really important, because I'm telling you that is not being brought out. So of course we talk about that word gets used, but then that skill part of it doesn't get valued. So first we do that. I mean, look, I'm talking about grassroots level. We start there. The larger one we'll talk about, but at that level, if we can, even the children or the community can identify those who have that skill and the peacemaker skill, both of them. So we of course have to distinguish those two. The other thing is on the word part of it, what might happen is, but that's why I want to connect to a word which they might be the community might be familiar with, is because mediation is being brought in more. It becomes like, oh, we are bringing some rocket science to you, and again, this is a form of colonization, that we know what mediation is. We know who the mediator should be. We will tell you who that mediator is going to be trained in this manner, qualified in this manner, certified in this
Mm-hmm.
manner. So what's going to happen, which I keep talking about, you'll have a class distinction. Those people whom I'm saying have the skill in the community and they're already trusted, who are doing it, they become the lower caste. That, oh, they are not
Mm-hmm.
mediators.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
ones that we are bringing in, because the judicial system, like you said, of course, it has a total backlog and is clogged, and therefore them this is
Mm-hmm.
convenient. That's perfectly all right, their convenience. But what will happen is they'll push in a concept and people onto the community, which then seems to be to the community, oh, these are mediators, the one we have with us, oh, they are not mediators. So this, and of course, we need a large number of people out there who are mediating, and we those people who are mediators, not, it won't be a few. And the courts themselves have enough matters for these people whom they call mediators. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to people to even be able to understand that they should not stop valuing those people within their communities who have the skill. Don't get lost in this concept that this is, I'm telling you, it's a form of colonization. That's why I was wanting to talk about decolonization and mediation, because although it's not a colonizer doing it, but in a way you're pushing the same concept that the colonizer had in relation to what I keep saying, dispute resolution happens in courts, and lawyers have to be part of it. That's the concept that the colonizer wanted, that you
Mm-hmm.
have to come to my institution, and the person that I tell you is going to be your intermediary. That's the way they develop. Now another intermediary called the mediator is someone that the courts are pushing onto you. So I don't want that to happen, because the whole concept of, there was Wale from Nigeria who was one of the sessions, and he was taking us through step by step that how initially the British created this person who you had to go to for dispute resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So you left behind your method, you went to this person. Then they said, oh, this guy will be your intermediary. So that was the lawyer. That was the
Mm-hmm.
start of a lawyer. That the person who has the issue is not going to talk about it directly, but someone else will now use the law, loopholes of the law,
Mm-hmm.
and you get all
Mm-hmm.
entangled in that. While a person who has the facts and wants to talk about it then goes at the back. So now you're playing with procedures, you're playing with technicalities, and the whole concept of that human to human aspect of it then goes away. So we won't fall for that trap. I don't want to fall for that trap of another
Mm-hmm.
form of colonization in mediation. I'm very clear, because I'm telling you, I do not want someone in the village who's actually doing it to start feeling inferior, thinking this person who's come in through a certified process or a qualification that the court has said, that person is a mediator. Because court has nothing to do with mediation. They have no, the whole procedure, the whole concept of litigation is totally different. So I've been
Definitely.
saying that, look, stay away from mediation is what I'm saying, but it's their convenience, and the judiciary gets their way, they're going to get their way. So we have to at least, because it hasn't taken off so much from their end also. So this is our time to be able to set the grassroots movement going.
Yes, I would agree with that. But it's a process. It's not an easy process. So much of it also will be on capacitating ourselves, or bringing out these positive aspects of our traditions
Yeah.
into the whole thing of mediation, dispute resolution, or whatever it is. But yes, and I agree with that. And we can do that as we go on.
Yeah.
Well, because it's culture. It's what has been imposed through us by, like in our case, 300 years of Spanish rule. You cannot simply remove that overnight, or probably in a decade,
Right. Right.
because it has been institutionalized. It has been passed on through books and everything. So those are things. So um, we have a lifetime to discuss this, and I hope that
Um,
in the process of our struggles we are able to define more the kind of mediation that we want. Maybe it's a people centered mediation process, or people involved process.
Yeah,
So
it
this
totally
is
will
it's
be.
an interesting discussion. I hope we can do it, no?
We, we
All
will.
year. I mean, for several hours, because traditionally in the communities, when we settle disputes, the elders do not sleep. It goes on for days and
Yeah.
days and days and days until things are settled.
Yeah.
So I hope we can do this. And I see that Baye
Bye
has
is here.
come in.
Bye is here. She's going to
Hi,
say hi to.
Baye.
She's going to say hi to us, but of course your session is still continuing. We have 15 minutes, so we're not going to shut yourself. So Bye is going to say hi to us. Hi, Bye.
Yes.
Hello.
Bye.
I'm so
I'm going.
happy to be in this platform today.
Thank you for
Yes.
being part of it, and I'm going to take this
Yes.
against you
Okay.
that you do not read my emails and you do not see the Zoom link. She sent me a message sometime back that where is the Zoom link? I said I sent it to you. I emailed it to you. People don't
It
look at my
happens.
emails.
It happens, Vikram.
No, people don't look at my emails, don't look at my posts. First of all, my emails are so long, my posts are so long that people read the first two lines and so I don't know what he's talking about. It must be some post of his he's talking about. So I don't blame you,
Yes.
Bai. I don't blame you at all. But Bai is from Cameroon. She's from Cameroon.
Hi, Baye.
Yes, I had saved the link to my Google Calendar. Now I was like, am I sure I have this link? Let me just double check again.
No, perfectly all right. So, but what we were discussing, Beverly, is that it's not something that we should say that is going to take a lifetime. It's just a matter of developing that culture. But for that, we need we need those people. That's the important part. So the people with the mediator mindset, up till we don't identify them, there is no use pushing mediation. I don't see any reason that you should do it, because if you don't have the people and you say that, oh, this is something I should do, then if it doesn't work out, I mean, if they don't get the people, they're not won't be able to mediate, or it won't happen in the way we should happen, and then they lose that whole thing, that trust on the process also. So I'm saying let's take it. That's why I wanted to take it slowly. Is we start there. The other thing is that once you actually experience the process, it might be at a community level. I'm not saying it has to be on the national level to start with. Once you experience that, because a job of a mediator is not easy, because that trust doesn't develop in once, because you're going through a
Exactly.
process. They would think, no, again, the fact that, oh, are you looking at it from their perspective or my perspective, and all those things happen in a mediation. So once people have gone through the process and have actually at the end of it said, oh yes, this person we can trust, because yes, they took the process thing properly, they'll talk to other people, and that's the way the word of mouth of the person will, process is one thing, of the person will also go ahead, and then things will happen. So first is right people, actually usage of the process, then them spreading the word, and then it look, things go viral on social media like that. This can also go viral. Why can't it go viral? It's like, oh wow, this is a process, why don't you try it? And it moves on. Problem with the court related thing is that it's, for me, that's not really mediation, because there what is happening, it's more of a deal making thing, that okay, the courts will take 10 years, it will cost you so much, so you are better off
Exactly.
settling. So that's a settlement kind of thing. Mediation is, which again you'll read on that World Mediation Circle part of it. I'm saying, look, values, moral values, principles, ethics, humanistic approach, that is what is important in mediation. That's a people to people concept. This thing that the colonizer structure and an inefficient structure that they have got today, that is no reason for you to settle. That's really good. That goes against mediation. Are you going to go and tell someone that mediation was very good when you had to settle because the courts are going to take 10 years? That's not mediation. You're never going to tell people about it. You won't feel good about the process. So that's why I'm saying, on the other end, the whole collaborative aspect of wanting to understand the other person, to actually be able to connect on a human to human, on a heart to heart basis, all those aspects, I think, are getting, again, this whole colonized way of pushing mediation is keeping that away. So that's why I'm saying today it hasn't really spread so much through the courts. It's the only way it's spreading, but it's not spread so much. So we still have an opportunity when we can, at the community, at the school level, create that atmosphere, because finally I'm saying that whole adversarial process, and the moment you touch that process, your whole mindset becomes adversarial, and you have lawyers to further fuel the fire. So you are going to have, even if your mediation takes place, it is going to be on a different level. So those are the thoughts that I'm putting across. You have to. It's a work in progress. I'm not saying that but after discussing these things with people around the world and looking at it from each part, because things are happening in certain parts, but then going wrong in a lot of parts. So putting it all together, this is what I've come out with. I don't know what
Yeah.
your thoughts are.
Well, I think, what I'm saying also is like, mediation per se is, it's not wrong, but it's not also what they call this. There might be some aspects of people's issues that cannot be solved by mediation as of now. No, I mean, I always look at it like, the nature of the conflict, the interest of the parties involved, and then, as you mentioned, the trust. No, so I would agree, definitely at community level, at a more local level, it's going to be more effective, because it's also something wherein, people have more control of it. But as it goes probably wider, even at national, that's something that I'll have to look into.
That's what I'm saying. I'm going to change that concept of yours. Why I'm going to change it, not from my just what I'm saying, that case study of Luis Ore will take you through that. I'm telling you, this is a misconception about mediation, not with you. It's in general. They think mediation is for those smaller disputes, those local disputes, but it can't happen. He'll take you through the entire process as to what the situation was, violence in that area, in that community, large corporation, a Canadian corporation taking up that mining project, how step by step he went through it, creating that trust, getting the right people into the process. There was someone who was not part of the process, and this whole process would have would not happen. Bringing that person into it, that person then taking it with the community. I mean, all that he's taken
maybe that would have been successful, because I think, for one, there would have been a bigger recognition of the people, of the communities involved in the process. So I think that's one element that has to be done, no? Because not all companies also think alike. I mean, not all companies or not all governments in a situation like now in the Philippines. I mean, it would be difficult to be mediating a conflict with government at this time, no? Or even with corporations who do not recognize indigenous peoples or indigenous peoples' rights. No, it's. I think there are certain, what you call this, baseline agreements for people to be able to enter into a process of mediation, whether at local, subnational, or national level. But it's something that has to be worked in. No,
I think it's the chicken and the egg situation. That once people experience it, the right people come out, and this whole concept that yes, a dialogue can take place. You can bring people in, people can get together and can resolve these larger disputes. That stage will come, but that will come, like I said, it can come faster if we look at people who already solved it in a certain part of the world. Because in Peru, they were I think, more active on this. The government was more active on it, creating that whole structure within it to have these people part of the government, or people who are, of course, available, but still the community developing that trust with them. So that people
and
working there.
exactly, because government was involved in the process. Government probably were genuinely sincere in involving people to be involved in this process, and then jointly, collectively defined how they should go about it. But not all governments are like that. No? So when you have like governments who are repressive, if you have a government that's fascist, like how do you deal with the military junta in Burma? Definitely the issue of mediation would be difficult, no, at that level. Or how do you deal with, like in the Philippines, uh, tagging activists, or even, as terrorists, and then just, it's a good thing in our engagement. Just yesterday we got a favorable decision in court that dropped the prescription petition declaring us as terrorists. My name was there, no, and others. Good for me, I wasn't, I wasn't shot dead or jailed, but many of my colleagues who were there in the list, I mean, I can name 3 at the top of my head who have been shot dead in the past 2 or 3 years. because of that. So the situations are different. So in other words, for us to be able to mediate, maybe there are certain, how do you say this, not conditions, not preconditions, no, but something that has to be achieved so that people will be able to engage into this process. One thing is knowing the process. Probably second will be understanding what will be your role, and then also having a common, result, a common, how you say, objective or aim of the process. So that has to be clear, and it's a
I
good
think
thing that you have this so that we can be able to discuss this and you know broaden our horizons, both of us, all of us, in this symposium.
because how I'm looking at it is that the people with the mediator mindset initially to play a role within the community, even in the dialogue process. So I'm saying maybe a mediation is not happening, but a dialogue has to happen, because definitely activism is one way of approaching an issue. A person with a mediator mindset facilitating a dialogue is a different process. Like I said, advocacy is a different process. All those are different processes. So if the people with the mediator mindset can facilitate dialogue in a different manner, and it works for the community and the government, and they can see yes, this is a method which is functioning. Look, advocacy activism will also happen. So we'll see whether these two processes, are they different? Is it looked at differently by the community and the government? So then that whole, first the confidence and the trust in the process has to come, and the person has to come, and slowly as that develops, then whether we can then get into the actual mediation of a dispute, then let's look at that. So I'm saying that, look, there'll be various steps that have to be put into place.
Yeah.
It won't be immediately, like you said. It's not like you said, is there issues, certain issues, you can't just say, oh, let's mediate. It's not going to happen that way. So creating that
Well,
whole
I think
environment.
for any conflict or any disagreement or contradiction, well, if it involves indigenous peoples or nations or peoples for that matter, is that the issue of self-determination would be something that has to be respected and recognized. As you mentioned, it should not be imposed. So it will really involve like a whole process of understanding what is involved in mediation, and then if they do engage into that process, it is something like a result of an informed decision because of a full understanding of that process. And then I would agree, no, it should be voluntary and wholeheartedly, in good faith, engage in that process. It should not be imposed, and it should not depend on the so-called expertise or presence of one or two persons in that, and then the involvement of everybody in that process. I would agree, no, but then, well, as far as indigenous peoples are concerned, when we engage in mediation or we engage in conflict resolution, I think the baseline would be a recognition of self-determination.
But the important, look, Beverly, the important point is that you have that mediator mindset. So
Yes.
I'm saying that when you are going to take that process through, you might call yourself an activist, but I am calling you a mediator. So you have the mediator
Okay.
mindset. So when you bring in a total different method of actually having that dialogue, I think people will understand. But because it comes with the, say, you bring it with the tag of activism, people, it's a brand. Oh, this is activism. We don't have to use any word. We are saying Beverly is there. She's going to facilitate a dialogue. She's concerned for the community, but she also understands the larger issues. And let's talk about it. When it comes from that end, it's the way people look at it. It's all perception. Finally, it's all perception, and I think that's how we have to. I mean, how people perceive it, and then we have to right people. If you are not there, to put a face to that mediator is something people will not have. So when we say Beverly is there, they understand, yes, Beverly, the community understands you. Whether the government understands or not, that'll be phase two. But community understands, yeah, Beverly has that. She's not going to just maybe be unreasonable or whatever. She's going to look at it on an objective manner. So those are the important things. So Beverly, now only thing is a little conclusion, a concluding remark that you would want to give, and then we'll close the session. So please.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me into this very interesting discussion. I think if we can meet in person we'll be continuing these conversations for hours. But thank you for this forum, and I think it will be it's something I think that will probably broaden our mindset as you mentioned. It is a good opportunity for us to discuss not only our issues and try to find ways, no, to solve this. Of course, mediation is always a welcome process and form of addressing these conflicts. Do invite us again if possible, and we'd be glad. And I will also follow through the other speakers as we go through.
So on the
So thank
last
you
day,
very much.
no, thank you very much for being part of it. Last day, 30th September at 8:30 p.m. We have that last session where we'll discuss the learnings and key takeaways that people have. So be part of that. And
Yes.
our it's not, it might not have been on a physical setting. Online meetings will continue. That World
Yes.
Mediation Circle, and part of that, what circles we'll create in Philippines and with the indigenous people. We'll talk about that. I'll have meetings for that. We'll have those separately. So process will happen. Lots of activity will keep
Yes.
happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and
Bye,
nice to
everyone.
meet you, Baye. And I'll follow you through this
Yeah.
conversation in YouTube. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Good
See you.
night.
Bye.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Have a
Bye.